So just a disclaimer before we begin today, that non-duality is a really intense subject, you know. It's about the death of the ego, or the death of the illusory you. So that's just a bit of a warning that it's a radical subject. It's not therapy, although it can be therapeutic, but it's not therapy, and we can sometimes talk about therapy and talk about seeking and dynamics and psychology, but that's actually not what it fundamentally is. What it fundamentally is going beyond the story of you and your life and healing. However, all of that gets talked about. But it's not therapy, and I'm not a trained therapist. And if you're having struggles in your day-to-day life, there's nothing wrong with reaching out to a therapist, somatic therapist. I particularly like somatic therapy and bodywork. But yeah, there's all different types of things that you can do. And if you're also having like lots of emotions come up as you begin to like pay attention and recognize who you are beyond the story, like suddenly big emotions can't come up, and also doing body work, somatic work, that can also really help with it. And having a good conceptual understanding of the apparent body-mind mechanism story, or karmas, or habits and conditions. Yeah, so that's my disclaimer. I don't always remember to say it at the beginning of each talk, but there it is again. So if you listen again and again, you begin to really hear that. Sometimes like people don't really believe it, you know, the first time I say it, they're like, yeah, but, and then as they get deeper and deeper, they're like, oh yeah, this isn't therapy. Or this isn't going to help me, this isn't going to fix me or fix my life. It's something much deeper than that. So abiding in the I am. So let's go with, what does abiding in the I am mean, first of all, before we start. So if you're new here and you're like, what's abiding in the I am? I'm just imagining like family members that have never heard about non-duality, and they're like, abide in the I am? Yeah. So what it means by abiding in the I am is it's a very deep practice, and it first of all requires a recognition of what you are and what you're not. So in typical mainstream society, most people think they are things. Most people go, I am happy, I am sad, I am better than, I am a doctor, I am a road cleaner, I am angry, I am 49 years old, I am 6'5" or 170 meters, I am intelligent, I am stupid. And these are all ideas that we've taken on about these body-mind mechanisms. And we sort of accumulate all these ideas, and we make it who we are. So we make it into us. That is who I am. Yeah, and there's lots of these ideas, like I am not good enough, I am vulnerable, I'm scared, I am a weakling, I am strong, I am tougher than. all these different ideas, and we don't always stick to particular ideas. We change dependent on moods as well. And so when you begin to get into non-duality, often the teacher will begin to question you or get you to question all these beliefs of what you are. So everything that you think yourself to be, they will question. So I am a woman, I am a man, I am non-binary, I am British, I am Scottish, I am Irish, I am American. And they will ask you to question that. And for most people that most probably sounds like madness, like how can you question that? Of course that's who I am. I am American. They're like, could that possibly, is there any way in which you could question that? Like, is America, so you think of yourself as American, say, for example, and you've been told that since you were a child, that I am American. But is that who you are? If you were, say, born in England or you were born in Europe, would you be somebody else because you weren't American? Or imagine if America got invaded by the Chinese or the Germans or the Russians or something, and they changed the name of America. And it happened when you were so young, you kind of forgot. I mean, America didn't used to be called America. I'm not sure what its Native American name was. Maybe they didn't think that they were from this big land, like it's, yeah. So maybe invaded and you kind of forgot because you were like 5 when it was invaded and its name got changed to, I don't know. Yeah. Don't know any name that you can name it. So it got changed to a different name. So maybe it got changed to Germany, for example. And then you kind of forgot that, and then you were like, I am German. I am from Germany. So maybe this is called Big Germany or something. I am from Big Germany. And this just becomes a given and a taken for who you are. But does that fundamentally change who you are? The country you came from. Most people maybe are like, yes, I am American, I am German, and it's like really, they feel like that really fundamentally changes who they are if they're not that. But something deeper than that, like, does it change you if you were born in a different country, that feeling of being you, that aliveness, that presence? And non-duality asks you to do that with everything. With your children, with your parents, with your family, with your body, with your looks, with your skin color, with your job, with your identity, everything it asks you to question. And through questioning this, what can begin to happen through time is there's a recognition of 2 elements which never change. And that is a sense of being, alive, and consciousness. Not personal consciousness, but the bigger consciousness, the perception of everything happening. Like you never are experiencing unconsciousness. There's always consciousness in experiencing. The mind says, oh yeah, I experience it in deep sleep, but actually you don't experience unconsciousness ever in deep sleep or when you're knocked out with the doctors. It's seemingly an absence of time. You cannot experience unconsciousness because it doesn't exist. Yeah, but that's another subject. But in your waking hours, say, for example, if we take out deep sleep, because that's a complicated subject, you always have consciousness and you always have the sense of being. And everything else changes and grows and expands over time. I mean, the American one is hard to say that that changes over time unless we talked about invasion or something. Or unless it's split off. Like something that happened to my country, I think in my lifetime, is that we went to being EU members where there was like freedom of movement, you know, to then being cut off. We didn't change our names, but then being cut off to no freedom of movement. So now I only have a passport and visa for the United Kingdom, sort of. I actually don't live in the United Kingdom, but I mean, from my birthright, I no longer have access to all these other countries. So imagine if America did that. Say if Texas was like, screw all these other left-wing states, we're out of this, we want to become independent, and suddenly Texas becomes an independent country and you're no longer American, you're Texas. It doesn't fundamentally change who you are. That alive beingness and the empty looking, the consciousness, perception is always there, whether you're Texas, American, English, European, Chinese, Australian. There's always these two elements, and everything else changes. Everything changes. Some days you might feel better than other people, sometimes lower. If you're a doctor, you might have that taken away if you make a mistake, or if you emigrate to another country, maybe they don't recognize those qualifications, so you're no longer a doctor. Everything changes, everything. And when you retire, you're no longer a doctor. These labels that we put on ourselves. So through questioning these labels of what you think yourself to be, you come back to these two initial qualities which cannot really be questioned. They always remain. The sense of being, which some people could call I am, and the sense of empty looking. The I am and the empty looking becomes more and more refined as you go into it. And you realize I am doesn't belong to anything. There's this pure being that's all things. But at this stage, what you do is you recognize that there's these two qualities. And then what a lot of teachers suggest for you to do is to abide in the I am. And what abide means is to rest your personal consciousness in the feeling of I am. So rather than I am a soccer player, you just stay with the I am. So every time it wants to go off, the mind wants to go off and identify with things, like, I really don't like that person, she's really rude, da, 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 da. You just keep coming back to that feeling of I am. And sometimes people don't know what the feeling is, so then it's almost like you come back to the mantra of it. And you say, I am, like the sense of being. And this is particularly a practice that Nisargadatta recommends. Other teachers, a lot of other teachers recommend putting consciousness, so your personal consciousness, and personal consciousness is the ability to move attention into itself. So rather than it wandering off into thoughts, you're putting it back in itself. So you're resting the personal consciousness in the personal consciousness. So, this isn't the end goal though, this is a practice for someone. It's not like as you rest your personal consciousness in itself, or you rest it in the I am, these two qualities lose all definition. So they lose all their boundaries, and the I am becomes boundless being, and the personal consciousness becomes big consciousness, unbound consciousness, non-localized consciousness. So is that causing seeking? So also in non-duality, if we go back to beginners, I need another pillow. Also in non-duality, I'll just get my pillow in. Yeah, so what's also talked about in non-duality is seeking. So seeking is the phenomena that happens when you're not at home, when you don't know who you truly are, then unconscious patterns arise of seeking for yourself in pleasure and pain. And this is actually what creates the I am the body, this seeking movement. So this separation happens from being consciousness, and you seemingly separate, and consciousness and the I am becomes something that belongs to a story, that belongs to you in time. And as soon as that happens, there is discomfort, like having a tiny little stone in your shoe. It eventually becomes like a big boulder, but it starts normally as a tiny little stone in your shoe. And there's this movement that begins to try and find a solution for that. But you don't know what the problem is. You don't know that it's a stone in your shoe. There's just this movement that isn't quite comfy where it is. So then it thinks, okay, is it in being the perfect child? Is it in having lots of friends? Is it in being good at school? So it starts off small. Because you're in a society that are all seekers, they encourage that, and they're like, yes, your happiness is definitely in the future, and it's definitely in having a good job, having lots of money, securing an attractive, wealthy, successful partner, having children, traveling the world, going on holiday, all these different things, flashy car, wooden floors, whatever the mind thinks it is. And then it seeks in these things. And this is like a never-ending beast. The more you feed it, the fatter it becomes, and then the more it requires. It doesn't just suddenly give up and be like, oh, I'm satisfied now. I have 1 car, 1 house, 2 children, and a partner. It's like, no, I need a bigger house, a better job, become retired. Yeah. Fame, social media success, and it's getting more and more crazy now, like with the internet, of what you need to be and what's required of you. And that's because we live in a seeking society. I mean, society could look so radically different and everyone could be so safe and secure if everyone worked together and chose simplicity and not the urge or the need to do better than your neighbor. And some people say that that's natural human instinct. And I don't know if that's natural human instinct, like the urge to do better. Maybe there is some element of like competition in us, but I don't know necessarily if we want to compete against like in some way maybe, but I feel like what begins to happen as you expand more and more into your truth is that you just love others and you want others to thrive. And yeah, there can be an element of competition, like if you're playing football or something, or a board game. But generally, you want the other to thrive. Like you're so rooted in love, like seeing the other thrive. It's kind of like a celebration. It's like you're thriving. Yeah. So, yeah, I was seeking. So that's what seeking is. So is then putting the attention in the I am seeking. Yes, but do I think that that's a bad thing? I think like everything, there is never right or wrong, an absolute right or wrong. Like if you've ever like listened to a couple argue before or friends argue and you've actually watched it from the outside, sometimes there is one person that is just wrong, but a lot of the time it's very complex and very grey and not black and white. So I don't think that this is black and white. Yes, it's seeking, but is that a good or bad thing? So when the seeker is present, when you don't feel like you're at home, you are gonna seek, no matter what. The momentum will be to seek, and it will, if it's not in spirituality, then it will be in your old habits. Maybe it'll be in alcohol. A lot of people, it's in alcohol and drugs in our society. It's not really spoken about, but yeah, a lot of it is people are dealing with it like in that manner, and or being on the phone, or being addicted to porn, or addicted to games, or it's gonna seek. You're not just gonna sit there. If you just sat there and were like, okay, maybe you'd wake up if you just stopped seeking in everything. You just sat there like a blob and waited for someone to feed you. It's like some form of meditation. But most of the time the body's not. It's going to go off and do things in order to make itself feel better. So to me, going off and seeking in what our society deems as, I don't even know if our society deems it as good, but what our society sells us, as opposed to deep spiritual wisdom. I would recommend that you seek in deep spiritual wisdom. That to me seems like a no-brainer. So yes, it is seeking, but that is much better than seeking in drugs. There are the few people that wake up from being drug addicts, because everything is a possibility and there's always exceptions, but most don't. Most don't. But there's always the exception, because life is like that. It's all possibilities and nothing is black and white. So yes, it is seeking. Of course it is seeking to seek in the I am. But that is way better than, seeking freedom in arguing with your partner, or blaming people, or taking lots of drugs, or over drinking, or spendaholic, whatever it is. Whatever tickles the fancy, or just being really numb and deadened to life. So all forms of spirituality, unless you get involved in like cultish stuff, like often engaged in the right way, can like really change and expand and shift your life. Obviously there's going to be negative forms of spirituality, because yeah, that's life. But if it's engaged in the right way, and if the teacher, even if the teacher is abusive, it can also have profound effects. It's really a weird subject. I'm not recommending getting involved with abusive teachers, but yeah, you hear when the student is ready and it's really like coming from its heart, they can even wake up, with the unenlightened teacher. So, yes. So wisdom is much better, I think, in terms of your life to be seeking in. However, when you begin to get down to the details of this, there needs to be great discernment and understanding of what's happening. So when you've begun to recognize the I am and consciousness, personal consciousness, so for a while it takes time to recognize personal consciousness, because personal consciousness is interwoven with the I am. So it's like I am conscious, and then they separate out, and you recognize that personal consciousness is prior to all thoughts, feelings, ideas, sensations, and the I am is prior to that too. So once you've recognized those two, that's quite a profound place to be at. And personal consciousness is a really interesting thing. the movement of attention is interesting because thoughts, they think and they tell stories, whereas movement of attention doesn't tell stories. It is still a movement of the mind, because who you truly are, the pure consciousness, doesn't move. So, and the essence of personal consciousness is that pure consciousness that doesn't move. So it's mind that's actually moving attention. Doesn't feel like it, but it is the mind that is doing that. Who you are is this vast, broad, expansive consciousness. So I'll just show you the difference. So right now you recognize that beautiful table and the beautiful wall behind me and the beautiful window. But only now I've pointed it out. Before I pointed it out, there was consciousness of them, but they were not named. Your personal consciousness was focused on me and following me. So everything that was behind me was unknown to you, but yet it was appearing in consciousness, in the big consciousness. But it wasn't known to you in thoughts. What was known to you in thoughts was where your personal consciousness laid, which was on me. There's going to be some of you that maybe were thinking about my wall and stuff, but for the most of you, you're listening and focused on me, and this is appearing in the big consciousness, but it's unknown. So you've got these two elements. You've got this personal consciousness which focuses in, which is the mind, and then this big consciousness that does not move, which is there in every experience. It's absolutely still. And then the personal consciousness is seemingly focusing that big consciousness and then also interpreting what it's focusing on. So you have these two different elements happening. And so this practice of putting that personal consciousness on the I am is very interesting, because you're moving it out of stories, and it's not a story. So the movement of the personal consciousness onto the I am is not actually a story. Prior to it, you might think, oh, I've got to move my personal consciousness onto the I am. But the activity of it is not a story. So in your thinking mind, that's one activity that isn't a thought as such. It's not a story. It's a movement of mind, so there's cognition there, but it's not a story. It's not a story of like who's done right, who's done wrong, she's a good teacher, she's a bad teacher, this is that, this is that. It's an activity which isn't about thinking. And that's really interesting. It's really interesting. It's a really profound thing. It might not feel so profound, but it is. So what's happening in that is you're discerning the difference between the thinking mind and the movement of attention. And in the movement of attention is this consciousness which never leaves. And you can move it onto something else that never leaves, which is the feeling of being. And neither of them are stories. So the story beforehand of doing it is, the activity of it isn't. So it's recognizing that. And it's also questioning who is doing that. So is it the story beforehand that is moving the attention? That's what our mind is always telling us, like I am a separate doer, I am commanding my attention to move, and I am doing that. As you begin to do it more, which will be a natural phenomena that happens no matter what non-duality you listen to. Even if you listen to Neo-Advaita, what's happening in Neo-Advaita meetings often is the attention is becoming very present and in this moment. But they're doing it without directly telling you to do it. And then they think that's the best way. And then this person thinks that's the best way. And this person thinks that's the best way. So here, I used to be a lot less without prescription, but that was many years ago now. I think I've been recommending doing this for many years now. And I don't think that that's wrong. I think that's also equally beautiful. But just this expression comes out now. So there's a movement. So when Neo-Advaita are saying that's a story, or bum on seat, I know that's like Tony Parsons says, all there is this, bum on seat. The attention is becoming very present. It's pulling itself out of stories. But it's happening without conscious thought of it. It's very beautiful. So it's like a practiceless practice. And when I'm speaking, often people resonate with me and resonate with what's being spoken about, and then they have these experiences, and that's because their attention is becoming very present, and then it begins to dissolve in itself. So these two elements, the I am and the personal consciousness, they are bridges to the infinite. So as the attention is becoming more and more in what's actually happening rather than in daydream, there is the possibility for this shift to happen from personalized consciousness to this big consciousness, from I am to beingness. There will still be personalized consciousness, and there will still be a feeling of I am as such, but there will be this shift to this other thing as well. So you know yourself as everything, as all, as this, as God, experiencing through an apparent body-mind mechanism. So most people have no contact, seemingly, to what they truly are. So they're just a person. And what happens here is it switches around. You become who you are as the beingness, the consciousness. And then you're experiencing through a body-mind mechanism, rather than a body-mind mechanism having beingness and consciousness. So yes, it is seeking, but you have to notice that that's seeking. So there has to be a noticing, and you have to notice who is saying that is seeking. That all of this is storytelling. So yes, the mind says, okay, you've got to put attention in the I am. So notice that that's seeking. Who is asking that question? Who is saying to do that? And who is asking, who am I? But then allow the attention to rest here and know that that's not really you doing it, because you, who you truly are and who's moving things, isn't this storyteller. The storyteller is the after effect. So you could say that presence was just about to happen, and then the person is telling the story of it. So the person says, okay, you've got to move the attention into the attention. But scientists say that choices are made 6 seconds before we're even consciously aware of it. So yes, you have to tell the story of putting your attention in attention, but you have to deeply know that's all illusion. That there's not really a you there practicing. There is a happening, and that you are attracted to this teaching, and so that is what's going to appear in that apparent story. But seeing through it all, so Nisargadatta says it's discernment. This isn't true, that isn't true, this isn't true, that isn't true. So yes, that is seeking, the mind wanting to put its attention in that, but then seeing it for what it is. That's not actually the cause of presence happening. That's not the cause of your movement. That is your story that seeks, and which is holding up illusions. So see through it. And it's like this process is almost like preparing the field for the seeds, which I always forget what that's called. You're like you're preparing, but knowing there is nobody preparing. It's God preparing, always God's movement. Every movement is God. And if this practice isn't for you, then that's totally okay. There isn't one path to this, there is infinite paths to this, and there is no path to this. So if this is like creating like chaos for you, because for some people this is really not the right path. For some people you need to go through a period of chaos, so you have to see. But if it's creating chaos, it's like letting that story go too, and then maybe your practice is bhakti, or is yoga, or is service, or is none, just neo-advaita. Who knows? And this isn't spiritual bypassing, what I'm speaking about. Some people now accuse non-duality as spiritual bypassing. It's only bypassing when you remain in emptiness. So the I am is the world and the body. And as you put your attention in the I am, all the unconsciousness in the body, mind will come up to the surface. Because you're bringing the body into the picture, because the I am is in the center of the heart. The emptiness, when you're just trying to stay back here, yes, you could call that a form of spiritual bypassing, but sometimes you need to do that prior to this next stage where that empty looking merges with the I am and the beingness and the body side. This is the love side. The emptiness without connecting to the beingness is a coldness, whereas this is like absolute love and intimacy and aliveness and presence. I think that Ramana or Nisargadatta talks about linking it up with the breath as well. So you do I am, as you breathe in I and then out am. So you're following the breath all the way into the body. This is totally waking this thing up. A lot of people are so disconnected from the body. Their personal attention is just in stories, and it's like the body is like a invisibility. It's something like flapping along in the background. Whereas when you go into the body, that's the love side. And it's so loving, what begins to happen is there becomes no inside or outside body. So the consciousness is like the neti also, not this, not that. And then the I am is like the love side. It's like this and that, this and that, and this and that. And the body becomes so big, its boundaries disappear. This is such love. So then when you're interacting with someone, they are you. Not you as a thought or you as an idea, but you as this. And there's no division. And then through time, when that shifts happen, like the human qualities become more and more softened and refined. So the human aspect, it becomes more and more balanced in its approach, and it just feels love and goodwill towards the other, because the other is yourself. Lets go of more and more its habits, conditions, ideas. So another is in front of you and it just feels goodwill towards them, no matter what they're doing. Whether they're screaming or shouting. Because that's the truth of what we are. What we are as the beingness and the awareness, a big consciousness, is we are all of it. All of it is our children. All of it is our creation. And it's like we fall more and more in love with ourselves. And this is maybe what beingness or aliveness or presence or God is doing. It's separated itself to fall back in love with itself, to know itself and to fall in love with all its complexities, all its elements. Okay, so so I'm doing this talk, so those that are listening on YouTube or watching through YouTube, I do this talk with people in Zoom simultaneously. And if you want to join that community, then you can do by going onto my website. And if you go onto the bit that says live streaming, I think it's in the box below, then you'll find out how to get into the Zoom meetings every Sunday and be able to ask questions.